People talk, listen, man, I'm going to raise that red flag.
This narrative, especially after 1 year.
1 year.
One bad year. It's one big splash move. And because I don't think people understand how much cap space we can create.
Alex, I want to ask you, because you're a very humble person.
And I'm never going to be right about anything.
Yeah.
I was right.
Sup, y'all? I'm back again. And I actually did a way too much work on this one because last time I did my last video said out loud that I think that Bryce was sabotaged this year, right? And I know we got to move on from this, and I know I'm supposed to move on from this, but what my biggest pet peeve is that we as fans make up narratives. We just make up things. And so I have to say on Twitter, I have to argue each specific thing that people are saying. And they're like, no, they never said that. Or no, what are you talking about? Just think about these things logically, right? So when I say the word sabotage, that's not completely set up to fail is more of what I should say other than sabotage. So let me just go through what I have to keep dealing with when I have to say things on Twitter, and I have to keep on responding to each individual person that is just saying things that are just incorrect. I'll go into it later because I'm going to go through the games that Bryce played and why the sabotage thing, what I'm saying was sabotage, right? Because there's so much bad in that. Play calling, penalties, defense, so much bad that making Bryce the scapegoat is insane. It really, really is. So let's talk about, because I think that he was set up to fail because I think that they were going to move on from him, right? One, and I've said I did a complete show about this, almost always new coaches want their own quarterback. Almost always. So Dave wanting to have his own guy makes sense, right? But you look insane if you trade up for a number 1 overall pick, give him 1 year, and then move on. So my thinking is that it would have been something like a Zach Wilson or Kenny Pickett's probably more of the what I would think would happen, and then you kind of trade him in the offseason. But you got to give him a chance, right? In theory. So let's start with him getting benched, right? So the week after, ESPN Countdown literally gets on and says that the Panthers have become the laughingstock of the NFL. And they say it used to be the Raiders, and then it was the Lions, and then it was the Browns, and now it's the Panthers. And they blame it all on Tepper because it's Tepper's fault. And almost everybody says it, right? Chad Johnson said they're a dumpster fire. J.J. Watt came out about it. LeBron came out about it. D'Amico Ryan said something. Pierce for the Raiders said something. All NFL dudes came out and were like, Ryan Leaf was like, what are you doing? Gerald McCoy, Micah Parsons, they're all just bashing Tepper. Why? Because it's on him. Now, when people talk, listen, right? So Joe Person asks a question to Canales and says, what role did David Tepper have in Bryce getting benched? And Dave said, I want to keep that private. So you just said that he had a role. That's basically, if I said, did your little brother steal a cookie from the cookie jar? I'm going to keep that private. Yeah, so you can just say no. You can just say he didn't have a role. You just lie. So you basically told us that it was on him. So this whole notion, just that in of itself, that David Tepper is not involved with the Panthers this year is ludicrous. It is absolutely ludicrous, right? It has to be. Now let's go. Why David Tepper? All of a sudden last year, all these reports came out that how bad it really was in Carolina. Well, they hired Frank Reich, who's been there, done that, veteran head coach, says it's not supposed to be like that. That's why all this stuff got leaked to the media. And guess what? He's fired halfway through the season. And who do you get to come in? You get your company man, Dan Morgan. Everybody else got fired under Fitterer. But Dan Morgan, company man. Let's bring in Dave Canales, who was a QB coach 2 years ago. Because they'll just do what I tell them to do. Now nothing's getting leaked. And it ain't because David Tepper is not saying anything. It's just not getting out. And he just said Tepper. I'm going to keep that private when asked if he had a role. So then we go to the notion of, where do I want to go next? Let's start with it being Deontay Johnson's fault, right? Well, Deontay Johnson, after the loss to the Chargers, he says, he's talking about Bryce, he says, he's our quarterback. He's my guy at the end of the day. We clicked as soon as I came in. Just because we lost 2 games doesn't mean I'm going to switch up on him. I got his back regardless. That's his quote. He's not going to say all that if he's going to be, no, we good. No, he's making a statement. Yo, I got this guy's back. Then Will Swinson, The Athletic, is writing an article that it spoke about in a Will Swinson story. He said The Athletic was tweeting about losing the locker room. He said the offseason edition of Deontay Johnson is not so subtly kicking the first-year coaching staff under the bus in the wake of a humiliating home opener against the Chargers. Deontay Johnson is not so subtly kicking the first-year coaching staff under the bus. So he's not subtle about that. So Deontay Johnson ain't just like this guy that's going to we know who Deontay Johnson is. Deontay Johnson ain't just going to say something for the media just to be polite. Because he's not subtly throwing the coaching staff under the bus. And he said all this stuff about Bryce. That's my guy. We clicked. I got his back regardless. Now, what if it's the other way around? What if Deontay Johnson became a problem because Bryce got benched? I don't know the answer to that, but it makes a lot of sense when you put that all together. You put those pieces all together. I'm just saying, that's a possibility. So what's the next topic about the stuff that we're just saying without really even knowing? Chad Johnson. The Panthers are a dumpster fire because of David Tepper. It's so true. Let's talk about the narrative that Canales said that Bryce is going to be back. I Googled it. I looked all over the internet. Canales never said that. In fact, on 10/21, he was asked in a dual question, are you preparing for Bryce to come back? Is Bryce going to come back this year? And if not, are you looking to trade him at the deadline? If he is coming back this year, you just say, yes, he's coming back, and no, we're not going to trade him, right? He responds, we're focused on the Broncos. That's where our focus is, getting Andy ready for the Broncos. Like, he hadn't named Bryce the starting quarterback against the Broncos yet. He was under the assumption that Andy was coming in for the Broncos. So he did not say that Bryce was going to come back in. I can even see something where, I remember after the season, he said, guys, I was really going week by week and trying to win that week. Like, this wasn't something that I planned. I was just trying to go week to week to week. And then about the trade, he said, that's all hypotheticals. you'll have to ask Dan and Brent. Well, week 3, after he got benched, he was asked that same question, and he said, no, we're not looking to trade Bryce. But this answer is, well, it's hypothetical. We'll have to ask Dan and Brent. So one, you're saying that absolutely not do I have a plan for Bryce to come back because he might get traded. You're saying that he might get traded. So there's no plan for him to come back. You're saying that we'll have to look at it with Dan and Brent. So you're putting out there that it is a possibility. You're saying it's hypothetical. You could just say no. Just like, hey, what role did Tepper have? None. No, you said, I'm going to keep it private. Like when people talk, listen, guys, we made these narratives up because this billionaire and these millionaires are just kind of feeding it after the fact. And we just guzzle up this BS. There's tape on this. You put this on film. We can go back and watch the stuff. It's so ridiculous. Yeah. So stuff like, oh yeah, it'll be good for him. People like just write articles. They're like, I need to write an article. Like it could be good for him. We know it's never happened before that a number 1 pick comes back and is back the following year with that same coach, but it'll be good for him. Okay, what? Why? Why is it going to be good for him when all these other Randy Moss is coming out and saying they're the laughing stock of the league? And you have Chad Johnson saying they're a dumpster fire. No NFL people thought that was a good idea. No NFL people. But we just see like these articles and we're like, oh yeah, that's probably true. It was going to be good for him. Now, I will say, I think it was good for him, but I think that's because Bryce is a different type of guy. I don't think. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this whole, I watched the film last night and I made this decision, right? We already know that Tepper had a say in this, right? But let's think about this logically. So they had a 1:00 game, right? In New Orleans. So he talks to the media, probably the game's over around 5. He goes to talk to the team. So his press conference probably starts at 5:30, something like that. So he does his press conference after the game and says, Bryce is still our quarterback, like very direct. He's still our quarterback. And then you leave. All other players have to get up and they have to do their press conferences. Then you got to eat. And then you got to get on a plane. And you got to fly home. And then you got to drive from the airport to your home. Then you got kids. Then you got a wife. So let's just say that he has his press conference at 5:30. The team eats and say they're done at 7. They go to get to the plane and they do take off at, let's just say it's 8:00. They're on the flight for, let's say, going through the airport, going out of the airport, and the flight is 2 hours. That's 10:00. Drive home. You're talking about getting home at 10:30. You haven't seen your wife in however long. You have to. I know if that was me, my wife would make me talk to her for, let's just say, an hour. And if your kids are up, that's an hour and a half, all this other stuff, right? So let's say you just start watching film at midnight. You've had this big day, and maybe you watched a little bit on the plane, even though I don't know if it would be ready yet. I mean, I guess it would. I don't know. But for people that do this, like when you talk to people that watch film, it takes quite a bit of time to watch film. And if you're talking about, so say that you had to watch film of the Saints game and you already had an idea that you might bench Bryce, you wouldn't directly say that, no, he's our quarterback. So theoretically, you have to go back and watch the Saints game. You have to go watch film on the Chargers game. And it has to be so completely clear because you're making a very, very big decision. It's got to be so clear that you're ready to do this. So people that watch film, they usually spend 5-6 hours watching it. So let's say you even though you had this big day, you just don't sleep, right? Or let's say let's give 2 hours, 2 hours of sleep, right? So say you start watching film at midnight, at 6 o'clock in the morning, you get 2 hours of sleep. It's 8 o'clock. Then you got to go to just say you got to eat breakfast and get to the facility. Let's say that's 9 o'clock. So then you have 3 hours because this came out at around 1 p.m. the next day. You have to have these meetings with your coordinator, all your other coaches, David Tepper, Morgan, Brant Tillis. So you have to make sure that they're all in the building and available. And I mean, David Tepper is a CEO of a hedge fund. They're usually pretty busy, but I guess he was just available. Dan Morgan was complaining about people were always in his office, but I guess he was available. All the other coaches were available. This could have come because usually the Monday after is like just a film watch day. Like you're not on the field, right? You don't need to announce that right away. Within 4 hours, he met with everybody, made this huge decision. Tepper and Dan Morgan and Brant had no problem with it, which seems very odd to me. And they told the media. So they had to tell Andy, they had to tell Bryce. And you don't need all you're doing on Mondays is we're watching film. You're not practicing, you're not working with the ones. Like it doesn't make any sense. You know what I'm saying? This is saying that you make this decision only having 2 hours of sleep. You could have had meetings the whole rest of the day and talk through it and try to figure it out. It's a huge freaking decision. This is your career. This is your career-altering decision. All right, I'm just going to be done with that because I think you get my point on that. So this had to have been preordained. It had to have been. So now let's work backwards on that, right? You get 3 new positions on the offensive line, right? That you never worked with in a game because Corbett moves to center. He's never played center before. Now, with the Seahawks, center was a very, very important position. With the Buccaneers, center was a very, very important position. They were scrambling to get a center last minute when Ryan Jensen retired. When Dave Canales was with Tampa Bay. And you just move a guy that's never played before. So your starting quarterback is going to go in this game with Austin Corbett, who is injury prone and never started a single game at center, and is supposed to just work right away. And you know who knew it? Alontae Taylor and Dennis Allen. Alontae Taylor had 3 rushes right at Bryce because Corbett's still learning the protections. Like, he was not touched. And you're getting 2 new guards, so their communication's brand new. You don't work on any of it in the preseason. You play 0 preseason games. So it's a brand new offense, brand new center who you take a snap from every single time. 2 brand new guards, 2 brand new receivers in Deontay Johnson and Xavier Legette, a brand new tight end in Sanders. That's a lot of new. And you're going into a division rival's house who you ain't beaten since Wilkes was here. Doesn't seem like you're set up for success right there. It really doesn't. Right? I mean, that sounds right to me. So let's go through. I'm just going to take you through this game. Both these games. Dumpster fire. Sorry. So, this is how the Saints game played out. Saints get the ball first. They go down the field, 76-yard drive in 5 plays, touchdown. Bryce, his first throw to Deontay Johnson in a game, because they haven't done anything yet. I don't know what happened. It looked like he just missed him, but Bryce being as accurate as he is, I don't know if it was just like, jitters or everybody's bad week 1. All the quarterbacks are, right? So Bryce throws an interception. right? That's what we all remember. It just didn't look right that play. Well, then the Saints go five play, and they kick a field goal. Then we get the ball back. Chuba runs, 3 rushes for 14 yards. Bryce scrambles for a yard, 1 incompletion. They get the ball back, 12 play, 79-yard drive, and a touchdown. So they're already up 17-0. This defense can't stop nobody. 17 points already, and there's a minute left in the first quarter. Bryce has thrown 2 passes. So try to get, you can't get a rhythm. I mean, you would think that they would give him some like easy throws like immediately, or just run the ball. So he's rushed the ball 3 times so far in a quarter. So Miles Sanders comes in and he rushes the ball 3 times for 7 yards. They ain't running the ball too well. Bryce goes 2 for 3 for 18 yards, and then Alontae Taylor comes free rush at him and sacks him. That's the last interception. I mean, that's the last incompletion that Bryce Young throws until 2 minutes left in the half. So then they get the ball, 9 plays, 5 minutes go off the clock. So Bryce gets cold again, and another field goal. Then Bryce gets the ball. He gets a 4-yard scramble. Then it's a run for Mingo, and he fumbles. So far, the only things that Bryce has done wrong in the whole first quarter is the interception and 1 incompletion. Because he hit all these other passes. And Mingo fumbles. Can't play Mingo anymore. He made a mistake. Then they get the ball back. 8-play drive, 4 minutes off the clock. Field goal. Then, 8-play field goal. And then, Bryce throws his 3rd incompletion of the half. Bryce has a 4-yard scramble. And Alontae Taylor comes in again, free rush. Nobody touches him. Sack. So we have to get the ball back. And there's 1 minute and 24 seconds left on the clock. Special teams allows a 47-yard punt return to Shaheed. And they do 1 play, touchdown. So then, no holding up by the defense. The defense is awful. The special teams is awful. They just allowed a 47-yard return for a touchdown. The offensive line has let Alontae Taylor come through twice. Mingo fumbled. This was not a good team. Bryce threw 3 incompletions. In the first half, there was 8 rushes for 29 yards and a fumble. Or 8 called rushes. This isn't including Bryce. So let's go to the second half. When they're down 30-0. So they get the ball, the Panthers do. We had Chuba. You might think, hey, let's like, if we really believe Bryce is the problem right here, let's start trying to run the ball. Chuba gets the ball for 1 time for -2 yards. And Bryce goes 0 for 2. So that's 3rd down, and he throws a 40-yard interception. And that's another thing we have to think about. All interceptions aren't alike. You have the ball, just throw it deep on 3rd down because it's the same as a punt. So he throws it downfield. It's an interception. It's going to Thielen. Then they get the ball, 13 play, another 5 minutes off the clock, touchdown. Panthers get the ball back. Chuba gets it 1 time on that play for 1 yard. And Bryce goes 3 for 5 for 56 yards and a 3-yard scramble for a touchdown. So the whole offense is just Bryce. Chuba ain't doing nothing. Miles ain't doing nothing. So Bryce is the only thing kind of holding this team up. He doesn't have any penalties. But you know what? We got Franks had a 15-yard penalty. Johnson had a 15-yard penalty. DJ Johnson on the other side of the ball had a 5-yard penalty. Nick Scott had a 5-yard penalty. Ickey had a 10-yard penalty and a 15-yard penalty. Hill had a 15-yard penalty. Sanders had a 5-yard penalty, and Clowney had a 5-yard penalty. So penalties racked up. Isn't that coaching? Isn't that what somebody told me? Penalties aren't the coach. It seemed like everybody sucked, coach included. But Bryce took them on a touchdown drive. Then They get the ball back again. They don't punt the whole game. 13 play, drive, and a field goal. They get the ball back. Bryce, incompletion. Miles runs the ball for 2 yards. You see the pattern here for how the run game is? Probably because the offensive line hasn't played together. You haven't played. And then the next play, Alontae Taylor comes in again for a sack. You just can't. They're like, you're just going to let us do this again? And they go. Then Hecker comes on, and he muffs the punt for 11 yards. So Hecker sucks. Our special teams are sucking. Defense really sucks. Running game is terrible. And so they go on a 2-play drive for a touchdown. And then Bryce goes 4 for 7 for 55 yards. And Chuba goes for 1 carry for 1 yard. Then Bryce goes 0 for 3. Sanders has 1 carry for 5 yards. And then his day's over. Bryce's day is over, and Andy Dalton comes in. So to end the game, the running backs and Mingo, because he fumbled, had 16 total carries for 46 yards. Bryce had 4 for 12. So Bryce had basically a fourth or fifth of your overall rushing. So this is on everybody. Like it's so wild how we give this blame to Bryce. When Hecker with a punt, with a minute left in the half, they allowed a 47-yard return by Shaheed. The defense didn't force 1 punt the entire game. The running game was 46 yards. So I don't think a lot of people would assign blame with all this dysfunction on this team, except for the national media, because they like to pick on the Panthers because we're a terrible organization. We're dumpster fire. So anyways, let's push forward. Let's look at the Chargers game. So the Chargers, oh yeah, let's talk about Alvin Kamara having 20 touches for 110 yards because we can't stop the run. Seems like a problem too. So we start the game off with a face mask on our special teams. Great. And they go on an 11-play drive. Took off 6 minutes off the clock and got a touchdown. So Bryce has started each game down 7-0. So Bryce gets the incomplete pass. Oh, by the way, the Chargers finished as the second best scoring defense this year. Bryce 0 for 1, and Chuba runs 2 times for 8 yards. LA throws an interception. Yes, we got a turnover. Awesome. Bryce 1 for 1 for 4 yards, and Chuba 1 for 1 yard. They get sacked, and the ball's on the 43-yard line. But you didn't get a kicker that can kick that far. Every other team has kickers that can kick 55 plus yards. But we have to punt. And they go for a punt, and Miles runs it twice for 6 yards. And Bryce does a swing pass to Miles for -2 yards. I don't know if you guys remember all the swing passes that were in this game. It was ridiculous. So basically, Canales is handcuffing Bryce. Because the narrative is that he's throwing interceptions. Which he really only, the first pass of the game was an interception. And the second one he just threw up for grabs because they were down by 1 million. And it was basically a punt anyways. So then they go punt. They go punt again. Bryce goes 3 for 3 for 10 yards. Then Sanders gets a false start. And we have to punt. So we went 2 for 2. Sanders got a false start. We get another pass. And it's short of the line because that's all Canales did was get Bryce to throw 3-yard passes. Then they go on a 13-play, 65-yard drive for a touchdown. So they're up 14-0. And it took 6 more minutes off the clock. Takes all your rhythm away. Chuba goes one time for 11 yards, and Bryce throws a pick. But the pick is on 4th down because they were going for it on 4th. So, again, basically a punt. You just got to stop saying, including all interceptions are the same. Then they go on a 4-play, 52-yard drive for a touchdown, and then it's just basically game over. Then Bryce starts the second half. He throws 1 for 2 for 12 yards. Chuba actually gets some yardage. He runs 3 times for 30 yards, and we get our field goal. And then they go 7-play drive. Takes 3 minutes off the clock. They get a field goal. Bryce goes 0 for 1. Chuba goes 1 for 3, and then a sack by Bosa. I mean, the game's basically over right now. They go on a 9-play, 51-yard drive. They fumble. It's whatever. Miles Sanders comes in, runs the ball 2 times for 1 yard. Bryce completes his one pass for 7 yards. So they only get 8 yards. They had a punt again. They go to a 10-play drive. That takes 5 minutes off the clock. I mean, you got to see a pattern here. They get a field goal. Bryce throws the ball. It's 6 completions out of 9 passes for 43 yards. Bryce scrambles for 6, and Miles Sanders rushes the ball 3 times for 13 yards. They go for it on 4th, swing past Miles Sanders, and it is no good. So we turn the ball over. Then they get it go 8 plays and a punt. Bryce goes 2 passes for 7 yards. And then, so let's talk about penalties again. Sanders, 9-yard penalty. Wallace, 10-yard penalty. Falk, 10-yard penalty. Thompson, 15-yard penalty. Jackson, 31-yard penalty. And Icky, 10-yard penalty. So we don't fix our penalties. But they get better at rushing. Because they rush the ball 17 times for 86 yards. But on the other side, J.K. Dobbins, who hadn't played an NFL game in like 15 games, and then he got hurt like the first game of the season last year, and before that he missed the whole year. So he's played like 1 game in 3 years, and then the week 1 game, he had 17 touches for 131 yards. Just keeping us cold, running the clock. So it's another game where our running game was terrible. Our special teams was terrible. Our penalties were terrible. So in these 2 games, this is our running game. Chuba has touched the ball 16 times for 78 yards in 2 games. Miles Sanders has touched the ball 12 times for 42 yards in 2 games. Bryce 5 times for 18 yards. Rushing. So we can't do the run. So this is when they get benched. The next game, because Chuba's not getting the ball, it's a mix of Chuba and Miles Sanders. Chuba touches the ball 26 times for 169 yards. Interesting. It's interesting how that happens. Very interesting. So I'm just throwing that out there, right? In the first two weeks, your defense was terrible. Your special teams was terrible. Your offensive line was bad. I know that there's this thing that says Bryce Young had all this time to throw. Well, let's just say we're just sitting back and playing defense because your defense let them score 40-something points. So they're only rushing with 3 guys. And Alontae Taylor, we're still getting to him. So everybody's terrible. And Canales is calling calls for like 3-yard passes. Now let's look at what these teams did to the teams they played on the other weeks. The Chargers the week prior beat the Raiders 22-10. They beat us 26-3. Pretty much the same. The Saints beat us 47-10. Next week, they beat the Cowboys 44-19. There's nothing you can like really point to except for saying, oh, he looked uncomfortable. So did everyone else. So did that defense. Everybody on that defense looked uncomfortable. Chuba looked uncomfortable. Miles Sanders looked uncomfortable. That offensive line looked uncomfortable. Canales looked uncomfortable. And then the next day, he's going to keep everything private with Tepper. Like when people are listen. Deontay Johnson said, he's my quarterback. We clicked as soon as we got here. I'm not going to switch up on him now. I got his back regardless. He's walking around subtly, not so subtly, throwing the coaching staff under the bus. So yeah, It doesn't look like it's a DJ Johnson, or it doesn't look like it's a Deontay Johnson problem. All these dudes on this team voted Bryce Young captain. They're not giving up on him after 2 weeks. He wasn't messing up the locker room. This notion that said he's losing the locker room because of him. Canales is losing the locker room. At least that's what Deontay Johnson's saying. At least that's what Joe Person's saying about Deontay Johnson. He's not saying Bryce is losing the locker room. He's saying Canales is. Then, so this notion that we're always going to put him back in. Carolina Blitz, #time, on November 18th said it's time to name Bryce the starter the rest of the season. What are you guys doing? They were still going week to week with 6 games left. They were 3-8. They weren't convinced at that point in time. After his game against the Giants overtime, after his game against the Saints, after his win against the Chiefs, they were still looking for reasons to bench this dude. And you know this. Why else would they not start him? Why else would they not call him the starter? Competitive advantage? Is that like, come on. Come on, guys. We're the Panthers. They were still trying to find a way to bench him. All's well that does end well. But every NFL person knows we got an owner problem. And if Canales is just doing the owner's bidding, the way Frank Reich wouldn't, you think that Tepper's not calling down to Canales? But he's not, I mean, but he's a company man. Usually when you have guys that rise to the top that fast, honestly, this is like just in any company, there's usually an eyebrow raise. Wow, how'd you go from quarterbacks coach to head coach in 2 years? Nobody else interviewed you. Huh. That's weird. Hey, Morgan, how did this whole front office get fired except for you? Seems weird. I don't know. But that all going back around, bare minimum, please stop saying things like Deontay Johnson's the reason why Bryce got benched. Don't say things like Canales said that he was going to put it back in, because he didn't. Don't say that Canales was ever thinking about trading him, because if he wasn't, he would say no. And he didn't. He said, it's up to Ben and Brand, but I don't know. Well, you seem to know week 3. And going back to my last episode, and now we're just floundering. Because you knew you were going to get rid of this dude. So you were putting cap in 2025, which we were supposed to be clearing for, our big-time wide receiver or pass rusher. But I see it. You're getting little placeholders here, and you're setting up for 2026 and 2027. But I can't prove that. But the bare minimum is just don't tell me that things that aren't real. Because just basically just regurgitating a narrative without knowing facts. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope you like going down this rabbit hole together. And all's well that does end well. This is all said. I like where Bryce is at. I like still having Bryce. I like Canales. But this is why I don't want to say pessimistic, but cautiously optimistic. Because I don't trust Tepper. I don't trust a lot of things that happen in this organization. I don't trust that we don't learn things. I don't trust that you can so easily manipulate your fans. When all these NFL dudes are saying, "Yo, what are you guys doing over there?" And we're like, "No, that's the good thing. They're like, we like, just like a brilliant move by Canales." It ended up doing well because Bryce is just an awesome human being, and he handled it really, really well. And I'm sorry that he has to deal with that. But appreciate y'all, and until next time.